Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Monday, October 28th edition of the MMAOB Daily podcast. I'm your host, as always, Adam Martin, and I'll be taking you guys through the latest in the world of mixed martial arts. Very exciting weekend for me personally on a few different levels. First off, I got to mention this podcast is now available on iTunes, so I'm really excited about that. It took a while to get it done, but it's on iTunes now. So to get it on iTunes, I have a link in my Twitter bio, as well as if you go to MMAOddsbreaker.com, it'll be in the page for the podcast. I post it every day, obviously Monday to Friday. So check the link out there. Also, if you go to iTunes, you can search in MMAOB Daily Podcast. That should come up. I think as the first thing. So glad it's finally on iTunes, guys. Please subscribe, rate, tune in all the time. Of course, this podcast is always available at MMAOddsbreaker.com and on our YouTube channel. So there's lots of ways to listen to the podcast. It's also available at Spotify, so that's another place to listen to it. So lots of places to tune in to be talking about MMA. And the other thing I'm excited about is I'm an uncle for the first time. My sister had her first child, so it's been an exciting weekend for our family, and I'm officially an uncle. I'm pretty excited about that. So it's been a really good weekend. And of course, there was a lot of MMA too, so it was a great weekend overall. I'm going to get right into it, guys. I mean, there's so much to talk about that I don't want to waste time here, so let's get right into it. I'm going to start with UFC Singapore because that was probably the biggest card of the weekend, although the Bellator cards were pretty good too. Pretty big anyways, the Saturday one. All right, so let's talk about UFC Singapore here. Pretty good card from what I saw. I'll be honest, I did not wake up for some of the earlier prelims. I woke up at 8 o'clock and I watched the main card. And for what I've seen and what I talked to a couple other people about, I didn't really miss much of the prelims. So I'm going to kind of skip through those fights, but I'll talk about the main card for sure. So let's start with the main event of the evening. Demian Maia against Ben Askren. Demian Maia wins via third-round technical submission, rear naked choke. Really good fight. These guys won fight of the night. Very, very technical battle on the ground. I was expecting a good fight. I mean, a lot of people were saying it was going to be boring. I expected a really fun fight, exactly what we got. I did not expect this result, though. Demian Maia, great performance here, great submission. Just proved once again he is one of the greatest grapplers in MMA history, and honestly, I think a Hall of Famer one day. 28-9 record. In the UFC, he is 22-9, so one of the most winning fighters ever in the UFC. 41 years old and still winning fights. He's on a 3-fight win streak right now. He's looked great. Submitted Lyman Good and Ben Askren. Beat Anthony Rocco Martin as well. And, you know, the sad thing about this is I keep picking against him. I don't know what's wrong with me, guys. I keep picking against Demian Maia, and he keeps winning. The guy looks great. And this is a fight I did not expect him to win. I did think Ben Askren would win this fight. I thought Ben's wrestling would be the difference, but Maia proved he was a better grappler. Just a fantastic fight, and for Maia, again, it's a huge win for him. You know, he said after the fight that he only has 2 fights left in his career. I think this win proves he's still an elite guy, definitely a top 10 guy. But at the same time, he is 41, so I can see why he's saying he only has a few fights left. He mentioned Diego Sanchez as a possible opponent. That's a fun fight. Diego Sanchez, another guy with a lot of wins. I believe they're 1-2 in welterweight history with wins, or something like that, or you have something like that. They're both in the top 10 for sure. I think Bisping has the most wins, but they're both up there. So definitely an interesting fight here if it takes place between Maia and Sanchez, two of the veterans of the sport. And also Jorge Masvidal also mentioned that he'd like to fight Demian Maia in a rematch. Of course, Maia did beat Masvidal a couple of years ago in a very close fight in Dallas, if I'm not mistaken. So it was a close fight, but Maia won that, and Masvidal obviously wants to run it back. And it was a pretty good fight, so I wouldn't mind seeing that one again. But I think Maia can still beat a lot of guys, and he's just so classy. You know, after the event, he went to Instagram and wrote a long message thanking his fans, and he was so complimentary of Ben Askren, saying what a great grappler he was, and he said he'd like to train with Ben in the future. And I think if they train together, that would help both guys, but especially Ben. I think there's a lot of things Ben can learn from Demian. You know, as good as Ben is at wrestling, I think there is some holes in his submission game as we saw in this fight. So I think that'd be great for Ben Askren. Now let's talk about Ben here. 19-2-1, no contest now in his career, but just 1-2 in the UFC. So he's struggled in the UFC since coming over. 35 years old now. I think probably on decline in his career at this point. Still a great fighter, in my opinion, though. Definitely a top 15 guy. A lot of people are just writing him off for dead. I don't believe that for a second. I still think he could beat a lot of guys at welterweight. Don't forget he beat Robbie Lawler earlier this year. Yes, it was controversial. He still got his hand raised. Lost to Masvidal in 5 seconds, crazy knockout, and then lost to Demian Maia. You know, the thing that I like about Ben Askren is win or lose, the guy's been in exciting fights in the UFC. You can't say this guy's a boring fighter. At one point in his career, yes, I think he was boring, maybe like 8 years ago when he was just grinding out really ugly decisions in Bellator. But if you look at his recent record, out of his last like 12 fights or something, one of them's gone the distance. Like, this guy either gets finished or he finishes his opponents. You can't say Ben Askren's boring. That Ben Askren's not here anymore. Like, if you look at his career, he only has, he's got, 22 fights now. Only 7 have gone the distance. So 15 of those 22 have actually ended inside the distance. Ben Askren's not a boring fighter. What's next for Ben Askren? It's hard to say. I mean, honestly, at this point, it could go either way. I think the UFC possibly could release him. I don't know, though, because he's still a guy that people want to see fight, win or lose. People enjoy watching Ben Askren lose. So I think people will tune in. They've obviously used him as a main event. They've used him on main cards. He's still someone that I think the UFC believes they can promote. Dana White actually made a comment this weekend. Someone said that they lost the Mighty Mouse trade on Instagram, and Dana White said, no, Ben Askren was an amazing trade for the UFC. I'll talk about that in a second. But, I think there is some value in keeping him here. But at the same time, they could let him go. He could go back to Bellator. He could go to PFL. He could retire. It's hard to say at this point. I think it really is up in the air kind of situation. So I'd like to see Ben return to the UFC. I'm sure he has one more fight left, because usually guys do sign 4-fight deals. So if he does have one more fight, you'd like to see him, I think, come back, fight someone maybe a little bit lower ranked than Maia, Lawler, someone at the bottom end of the top 15, or possibly not even in the top 15, just to get a win again, because he needs to get back in the win column. But to me, Ben Askren is still a very solid fighter, and I think he's brought a lot to the UFC. Even though a lot of people are hating on him right now, I still think he's did pretty well, I think, in the UFC. Even despite a 1-2 record, I do believe he's actually did well for the UFC, just because people want to watch him fight, win or lose. As far as the trade goes, it's actually been just over 1 year. Cole Sheldon did an article yesterday at BJPen.com. I hadn't even realized it'd been a year. I thought it'd be a little bit less than that, like 10 months or something. It's been a year since the UFC and one agreed to the trade between Ben Askren and Demetrius Johnson. And at this point, it's got to ask who won the trade. At BJPen.com, I actually have an article right now with Dana White's comments, and also we have a poll. So if you guys want to go and vote in that poll, it'd be cool. I asked who won the trade, UFC, Bellator, one championship. Was it a win-win trade, or did no one win the trade? So there's 4 options there. Go and check it out, and you guys can give your pick for who do you think won the trade or lost the trade, or if there was no winner. If you ask me, I think the UFC won the trade. I know that's a little controversial. Demetrius Johnson did well. He's did everything that's expected of him and won. He's won 3 straight fights. He won the flyweight tournament. He's looked great. Everyone knows Demetrius Johnson is a great fighter. There was no question about that. Even when they traded him, we all knew that he was an elite guy, a pound-for-pound kingpin, one of the greatest fighters of all time. At the same time, though, it was proven over the course of 7 years that the UFC could not promote the guy for whatever reason. I think that's a failure on the UFC's part. I also think it's a failure on Demetrius Johnson's part. Both guys, both sides, I think have to blame there for the reason he wasn't promoted properly and didn't become that mega star where he should have. Because if you look at his resume, there's no one better than Demetrius Johnson in the lower weight classes. No doubt about that. But he just wasn't able to become that big star. Whereas Ben Askren, even though he's only 1-2 in the UFC, I think that he's did a lot more for the UFC as far as promoting fights and generating fan interest than arguably Demetrius did in his whole career. I mean, even though he hasn't looked good in his last 2 fights, Ben, people still talk about those fights all the time. Everyone talked about that Masvidal fight. That's one of the greatest knockouts of all time. That's a highlight that will live on forever as the quickest knockout in UFC history. And this fight with Maia was great. And the Lawler fight, controversial or not, that was a fun fight too. So, Ben Askren, I think, has brought a lot to the UFC. Demetrius has been great in one. Don't get me wrong. The guy's a great fighter, but I think the UFC actually won the trade. But I'd like to hear what you guys think. So go ahead and vote in the poll. Leave a comment here if you want. Definitely curious to see what other people think. Let's talk about the rest of this card here. Like I said, there was a few good fights in this card. The co-main event, very, very controversial decision here. Stevie Ray defeats Michael Johnson. Majority decision, 29-28, 29-28, 28-28. A very close fight. Michael Johnson, man, I don't know what happened to this guy. I think the move to 145 definitely was not a good idea for him. I think that did hurt his career, but geez, this is a fight he should have won against Stevie Ray. You got to win this fight, Michael. So I don't know what's happened to him. Very confusing career for Michael Johnson now. 19-15 now, so just above 500. But if you look at his career, it's so weird, right? He's beaten Tony Ferguson. He beat Dustin Poirier. He's beaten Edson Barboza. But he's lost to guys like Stevie Ray and Reza Madadi and Paul Sass, Jonathan Brookins. A very, very weird career. Very strange, very inconsistent fighter. And this fight was super close. I'll tell you how I scored it. I had to draw. I gave Michael Johnson the first 2 rounds, and I gave it 10-8 to Stevie Ray in the 3rd round. I think Johnson kind of lost the fight for himself. He just kind of gave up in the 3rd round. Don't know what happened to this guy. At this point, you got to wonder if the UFC keeps him around, if they release him. I think there's a chance they could cut him. He's still a skilled guy, don't get me wrong. His striking's pretty good. His boxing's very crisp, but Hasn't had a knockout win in 3 years, and for the most part, he's losing 2-5 in his last 7 fights. So he struggled, to be fair to him. Obviously, lost to a lot of elite guys, but when you're losing to guys like Stevie Ray, that's not a good sign. So I think the UFC might release him, but they could give him another fight. It's up in there as far as he goes as well. Stevie Ray, though, I mean, he needed this win, snapped that. He had lost 3 or 4 fights, so now he's actually won 2 or 3. It's kind of weird how the fight game works, right? But overall, I still haven't been too impressed with Stevie Ray in the last few years. A guy I was impressed by. I mean, this was a great performance, and he won a bonus. Beneil Dariush defeats Franco first round submission rear naked choke. Just a great performance here by Dariush. I thought Franco had a good chance to win. I was completely wrong. Dariush showed off that elite ground game once again. He's on a 3-fight win streak now. He beat Drew Dober and Kamako by submission. Also, Thiago Moises. For Frank Kamako, again, I thought he had a good chance to win this fight, but he actually lost. He's lost 3 of his last 4. Still a very fun fighter to watch, win or lose, though, kind of like in that same situation as Ben Askren, where he's struggling to pick up wins, but he's still putting on good fights, win or lose. So exciting fights. I think he'll get another fight. But for Dariush, this is a great win for him, and it probably puts him in line to fight someone ranked in the top 15. Next up, and this was, for my money, the best performance of the night. Cyril Gane defeats Don'Tale Mayes, 3rd round submission with a heel hook at 4:46 of round 3. Incredible submission. Great performance by Gane. This guy is unbelievable, and I do believe he is a future champion possibly in the UFC, at least a contender at this point. I mean, this guy is so talented. 29 years old, 5-0. He's only been fighting as a pro for just over a year, which is insane to me. But in the heavyweight division, there's such an opportunity, and this guy's looked amazing. 5-0, 5 stoppage wins, 3 by submission, 2 by knockout, 4 TKO champion, 2-0 in the UFC so far. He is just fantastic. I'm a big fan of this guy, Cyril Gane. I think he's going to go really far in the sport. Super young, too, at 29. That's young for a heavyweight in the UFC. So this guy's good. Don'Tale Mayes ran into a really tough fight here. I think he'll probably get another fight if I had to guess. I think there are some guys at the bottom end of that division he could beat. I think he could beat guys like Tai Tuivasa, someone like that. But finding someone that's talented and as well-rounded as Cyril Gane, just always a bad matchup for Don'Tale Mayes. He loses the decision here. And kicking off the main card, Muslim Salikov really put on a clinic here against Floriano Staropoli. 30-26, 30-26, 29-28. What a performance here by Salikov. He's looked really good lately as well. 3 straight wins. Lost his UFC debut and won 3 straight since then. Guy's very talented. He is older at 35, but he's a very talented guy. And for Staropoli, a little disappointing here by him at 26. He had a big age advantage. He should have, I think, been a lot more competitive here, but lost the fight. He's actually 2-1 now in the UFC, so still a winning record. But, man, I think this was a fight he could have won, and he got beat up pretty bad. As far as the prelims go, Brandon Marcos defeated Ashley Yoder via split decision. Brandon Marcos continues that streak of win-loss, 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 win-loss. He had that draw mixed in, but for the last, 15 fights, she's win-loss, win-loss with the 1 draw. That's insane to me. So, talented fighter, Brandon Marcos, but so inconsistent. Very, very tough to bet on. I did like her in this spot against Yoder, who's also inconsistent. Yoder is really struggled in the UFC, I think, overall, 2-4. So, that's not a great record. She'll probably get another fight. That division's obviously in need of fighters at all times at 115. But Marcos, this is exactly the type of fight she wins. She's a gatekeeper at 115. She won this fight. Rafael Fiziev defeats Alex White. Unanimous decision, 29-28, 30-27, 30-27. Picks up his first win in the UFC, and Alex White is another guy I think he's going to be released. His record in the UFC is just really not good. 4-6. Yeah, I think he's almost surely going to be cut. Movsar Evlov defeats Enrique Barzola. Evlov is a very talented fighter. I think he's pretty good. He won this fight 29-28. 29-28, 30-27, competitive fight, but he ends up getting the win. Next up, Sergey Pavlovich defeats Maurice Green via TKO. First round, 2-11 and 2 the first round. Great win by Pavlovich. I picked Green in this fight. I was wrong, obviously. Pavlovich is very talented as well. 27 years old, another young heavyweight. He lost to Overeem in his debut. That was such a bad matchup for him, but since then, beat Goldman Green. He's looked really good lately. He's got a lot of KO power. 2 straight first-round wins. This guy can knock out a lot of people in the UFC heavyweight division. For Maurice Green, another older guy in the division at 33, but at the same time, I think he's looked pretty good overall besides this fight. 3-1 now, so he'll get another fight for sure. Next up, Loma Luke Bunmi defeats Alexander Albu, split decision, 30-27, 29-28, 30-27. I should say 28-29. Just weird how 2 judges had 30-27 for Luke Bunmi, and then one had 29-28 for Albu. That's just strange to me. Luke Bunmi is a pretty talented fighter, 23 years old. Obviously, very good striking skills, good ground game as well. Excuse me for the dogs, guys. I apologize for that. But yeah, a very talented fighter, and she looked good in this fight, obviously. And then picking up a big upset in the opening bout of the prelims, Rafael Pessoa defeats Jeff Hughes via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the board. Surprising result here. I don't think too many people were picking Rafael Pessoa to win this fight, but he looked good and he got the win. So overall, a pretty solid card. There was a couple of good finishes, but a lot of decisions as well. We'd like to see some more finishes, but I'm 100% expecting some more finishes this weekend, guys, at UFC 244. I'll be breaking down this card tomorrow with Cole Sheldon at 11 a.m. Eastern, breaking down UFC 244. I cannot wait to do that. And also, I should mention, I believe I will be part of the Athletics kind of poll of MMA journalists and pundits of who they believe will win the main event of the evening for UFC 244. So they reached out to me and they asked me to send in their preview. So I did, and I sent my prediction in. So I'm excited about that. Making my athletic debut, so that should be pretty cool. All right, let's talk about Bellator now, because there's 2 Bellator cards, so I'm going to go through them too. Bellator 232 was the more important card, so I'm going to start with Bellator 232, and then we'll go to Bellator 231. So Bellator 232, main event of the evening, Douglas Lima defeats Rory McDonald, unanimous decision, 49-46, 50-45, 50-45, to claim the UFC welterweight championship, the Bellator welterweight championship, the Bellator welterweight Grand Prix title, and also $1 million grand prize. So, man, I'm so happy for Douglas Lima. I've always liked Douglas Lima. He is a great fighter. Been a fan of his for years. I remember watching him at MFC. They used to have that on Access TV years ago. I used to watch him fight. He fought in Canada a bunch of times. Fought in Windsor, Ontario at one of the first cards in MMA, MFC 29, beat Terry Martin, their former UFC fighter. Then he went to Bellator. I've seen him fight in Bellator Casino Rama in Ontario. I've always been a big fan of Douglas Lima. I love the guy. Incredible fighter. If he was in the UFC, I think he'd go really far in the welterweight division. So well-rounded, great striking, great wrestling, great chin. He's just a fantastic fighter. He really is. So just one of the best guys in the world right now. 3-time Bellator welterweight champion now. He's actually won 3 tournaments in Bellator. And again, he's $1 million winner now. So I couldn't be happier for Douglas Lima. Great guy, great fighter. When I met him at UFC 231 last year in Toronto, I met him backstage. He was there for Diego Lima's fight against Chad Laprise. Super nice guy. I was with Sherdog at the time. Took a couple pictures with him for Sherdog. Talked to him for Sherdog. He was awesome. So I'm really happy about Douglas Lima. Great guy. And man, he's looked amazing in Bellator. 3 straight wins now. Rory McDonald, Michael Page, Andrei Koreshkov ran the table through that tournament. And according to Scott Coker, next in line for him is Lawrence Larkin, who will be fighting at the New Year's Eve card against Ryzen. Larkin wins that fight. Scott Coker says he'll be next in line to fight Douglas Lima. So I'm looking forward to that rematch. We did see that fight in June 2017. Lima won that fight, but a couple years later, who knows what the difference will be. I think Larkin stylistically actually matches up well with Lima. He might have lost that fight then, but this could be a different fight now, although obviously I think everyone's going to be picking Lima to win that fight. As far as McDonald goes, very disappointing in his performance here. I did not think he did that much in this fight. He just looked very gun-shy, and at this point, you have to say he's on decline. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He's won. Overall in Bellator, he's actually 3-2-1, but in his last 4, he's just 1-2-1. So he struggled. And the John Fitch fight, I think, was definitely a bad performance by him. He looked good against Demon Gracie. People were writing him off there. He looked good in that fight. But this fight, he didn't do much. He just kind of got picked apart for the whole fight. He got out-wrestled. Just a poor performance for Rory McDonald. You know, he's still only 30. He's still young, but at this point, I think he's taken a lot of damage in his career. I just don't feel like he'll ever live up to the hype that a lot of us had earlier in his career, where most people thought he'd be a UFC champion. He never accomplished that. He was a Bellator champion. He did beat with Douglas Lima. Maybe we'll see the trilogy one day, but I believe this was the last fight in his deal. And at this point, you have to wonder, does Bellator bring him back? Does he go back to the UFC? Does he go to PFL? Does he retire? It's hard to say. I mean, at this point, it's very hard to say. I think he probably does fight again for Bellator, but he might take some time off. I think after fighting 3 times this year, questioning his motivation, I think he should take some time off. But yeah, I just didn't think he put on a good performance here. But you can't forget, this guy does have a win over Lima. He beat Tyron Woodley, beat Damian Maia, so he had some great wins. Nate Diaz as well. Some great wins in his career, but really struggled in this fight. Paul Daly looked amazing, knocking out Sadawad. To be fair, Sadawad took the fight on 4 or 5 days' notice at a catchweight. So you got to give Awad credit for stepping up, but Daly looked amazing in this fight. That left hook still knocking guys out all these years later. 36 years old, 36 young. He's looked good. He's looked really good lately, and I think he's probably very close to getting a title shot. Probably needs one more win, but he's right behind Larkin. Even though he did knock out Larkin, which I think a lot of people are like, "Hey, if he knocked out Larkin, why isn't he getting a title shot?" But that fight was a couple of years ago now. I'm okay with Larkin getting a title shot, but I think Daly's right there. Patrick Mix looked amazing, winning by submission over Isaiah Chapman by Sulov stretch. great submission. This guy's so good. Really, really dangerous guy. He's got to be up there for a title shot right now as well. Manny Muro pulls off a big upset here against Nick Newell, 29-28, 27-29, 29-28. He was a plus 500 underdog. I like Nick Newell a lot, but really, why was he minus 700 in this fight? That's kind of excessive in my opinion. I know he's looked good lately, but Nick Newell's he's still not an elite guy. So minus 700, I don't know who was laying that kind of juice on him, but I wouldn't have did that. It's not like I would have bet on Burrow either, but there's no way I would have laid minus 700 Nick Newell. So if you bet on him, you're asking for trouble, I think. Burrow pulls off a big upset, and Kevin Ferguson Jr. defeats Craig Campbell via first round stoppage. Kevin Ferguson Jr. really needed this win, bouncing back from that loss to Corey Browning. 4-2 record now in Bellator. Still a pretty good prospect. So overall, I think there were some talking points in this card. Not an amazing card by any means, but definitely a few good finishes overall. And a much better card, I think, than the Bellator 231 card, which I think had some issues. The main event between Frank Mir and Roy Nelson. Frank Mir wins the fight, unanimous decision, 30-27, 29-28, 29-28. Just a terrible fight, though. I mean, both guys really are at the end of the careers. Frank Mir, you got to give him credit. Came with a good game plan. That leg kick was really, the inside leg kick was really working well on Roy Nelson here. Snapped a 4-fight losing streak. After losing to Habayala by TKO, I thought he was completely done, but he looked good in this fight, I guess. I mean, the thing is, Roy Nelson is, at this point, on a 4-fight losing streak himself, and he's really struggled as well. I think Roy, at this point, could potentially be thinking about retirement. 43 years old, and he's super old now. Scott Coker, I think, is kind of hinted at that as well. So just a bad fight. I mean, again, Frank, you got to give him some credit here for putting on a good game plan, but just not a great fight by either guy. Phil Davis had an amazing performance here, though. This was a great performance by Phil Davis, defeating Carl Albrechtsen via third-round stoppage. At the same time, though, I mean, I thought he was going to dominate this fight from the get-go. I know a lot of people were giving this Albrechtsen guy too much credit, I think. Phil Davis is still a great fighter. I mean, yes, he's not a champion. He hasn't won a championship in the UFC. He hasn't won it in Bellator, but, he's still a great fighter, and I'm not surprised at all he won this fight. So good for Phil Davis. And I expect him to be maybe one fight away from a title shot. Hard to say at this point. He's lost to Ryan Bader twice, but he's got to be up there. Next up, Ed Ruth defeats Jason Jackson via split decision, 29-28, 28-29, 29-28. I thought Jackson had a really good chance to win this fight. I think people were just kind of counting him out, but Ed Ruth gets the nod. Very, very close fight. I think it could have went either way, but a very close fight, very good fight, very fun fight. So good fight for both guys. Ed Ruth moves on, but Jason Jackson shouldn't hang his head. This was a good fight. Iliar Joanne defeats Beck Rawlings via submission with a knee bar. You don't see that too often, obviously, in women's MMA with a knee bar. Second round submission. I did pick her in this fight. Joanne is the dog. I thought Rawlings, as a minus 500 fighter, she's 7-9 now in MMA. You can't lay juice on her. So, again, you're laying juice on Beck Rawlings. You're asking for trouble when she loses this fight. Nobody up the main card. Jake Hager defeats there was a no contest here between Jake Hager and Anthony Garrett. First round groin strike. Man, that was a brutal knee by Jake Hager on Garrett. So obviously the fans were booing. People weren't happy the fight was called off, but this guy took such a nasty groin strike, and I can't blame him for not being able to survive that. It was a nasty, nasty groin strike. So no contest, and honestly, just disappointing in both guys. Just not a great fight, and maybe they'll run it back, but do we need to see that again? I don't know. I'd just like to see Jake Hager fight someone decent. Like, he keeps fighting these guys that are really not on his level, and he should fight someone that's decent. But in this fight, honestly, who knows how it could have went if it went past the first round, because Hager was having trouble taking Garrett down. If he can't get the takedown, he could be in serious trouble in his career. So, I don't know. Just an overall disappointing fight. Of the two cards, I think Bellator 232 was the better card. But overall, I still think the UFC had probably the best card of the weekend. All right, a couple other things here. Nate Diaz is fighting at UFC 244. It's official. It's cleared. He's cleared by USADA. Now, this obviously raises a lot of just controversy, because there's so many fighters in the past that have not got the same, I think, leniency by USADA that Nate Diaz had. Like, Josh Barnett has been on his social media really just not happy about this decision, because Josh Barnett lost over a year and a half of his career. Actually, Josh Barnett's not even fighting anytime soon. Scott Coker said he will not be fighting at the Ryzen Bellator card at the end of the year, which I was surprised by. I mean, Barnett seemed to be waiting for that card to go back and make his return to Saitama Super Arena, but he will not be fighting on that card. So Josh Barnett's lost a lot of time in his career because of this USADA thing. And listen, I'm happy the fight's happening. It'd just be nice to see the rules applied fairly to all the fighters. Don't get me wrong. This is a big money fight. I understand why they make a special exception for this fight with Nate Diaz. And I think we all know this guy's a clean fighter. We all knew he was, but it's just kind of funny that he was cleared so quickly, but other guys Like Sean O'Malley's another guy. He's still out there. Like I said, Josh Barnett, Tim Means was a guy that lost time in his career. Yoel Romero. All these guys were eventually exonerated, but it took them a while. With Nate Diaz, it was like a few days later. So don't get me wrong. I'm excited about this fight. I can't wait for this fight. I understand why this happened, why he was cleared so quickly, but it's just kind of strange that there's so many other fighters that have had to wait, but Nate Diaz gets kind of a pass here. Again, it's not his fault. He took a contaminated substance. They found the substance, and that company, I think they should probably get sued. Yeah, I can see why guys like Josh Barnett are very upset about this. All right, a couple fight announcements here. These cards are not announced yet. So 2019, they have obviously been making some fights. Like McGregor's next fight will be in 2020. McGregor's next fight, a couple other fights, but there's no cards officially announced. So these fights do not have cards attached to them, but they are some decent fights. Nasrat Haqparast will fight Drew Dober at a card 2BA in 2020. Haqparast, obviously one of the best prospects in the lightweight division, looked really good. 11-2 in his career, 3-1 in the UFC, coming off a great win over Joaquim Silva. Before that, a fight of the night against Thibaut Coutey. It's funny though because I remember a few weeks ago, I talked about the show. He's like, "Oh, I'm fighting a ranked opponent next, or a big fight or something." Now he's fighting Drew Dober. I mean, Drew Dober's a decent fighter, but come on, I've been close to being a ranked guy. Drew Dober has won 4 of his last 5 though. He has looked pretty good. Coming off a knockout win over Marco Polo-Reyes. I still got to like Haqparast. Should be a good fight, but I think Haqparast has a good chance to probably knock Dober out, although Dober has got a really good chin. And the other fight that's been announced is Nate Landwehr versus Herbert Burns, the brother of Gilbert Burns. And Gilbert Burns, by the way, he was there in Singapore, and he's like, "Oh, I took a 20-hour flight home to Miami, and I want to fight again this week." This guy's just a savage. I love Gilbert Burns. But, yeah, Nate Landwehr, he's, I believe, an M1 champion. He's looked really good lately. 31 years old, 13-2 record. He's actually on a 6-fight win streak. He's a guy that a lot of people have been talking about as someone who could come to the UFC for a little while now. A lot of experience. And like I said, an M1 champion. He's looked really good in M1. So this is a good signing by the UFC. I'm excited about this. And takes on Herbert Burns, who I think is another really good signing by the UFC. Herbert Burns is a very talented guy. Again, the brother of Gilbert Burns, 9-2 record. He won on the Contender Series to earn a UFC deal. He beat Derek Minner. That was a fight he should have won. He's on a 3-fight winning streak overall. He's lost twice in his career. One fight to the Kabuliev, who's in PFL, another guy to Idzarov, who's also, I think, in PFL. So he has a couple of good wins in his career. Timothy Nasiukin, that's the guy that knocked out Eddie Alvarez and won. Also, Honorio Bonario, who's a really talented fighter there as well. So he's a pretty talented guy. I think this should be a really fun fight. Honestly, I don't even know who's going to win because I think Landwehr is very, very dangerous too. So a very good fight here. Like the signing by the UFC for both guys. Again, card 2BD. So we have no idea when this card is going to take place, but I'm assuming in the early part of 2020. At this point, it's the end of October, so I think they will start announcing the early 2020 calendar for the UFC. So it's crazy, right? The year's gone by really fast, guys. But yeah, 2019 is almost over, and then we're at 2020, and we'll have a lot of cards there, including the Conor McGregor card. And there's a rumor out there that Tyron Woodley could be fighting. Who was it again? Someone sent me this yesterday. Leon Edwards. Apparently, there's a rumor that Leon Edwards could be fighting Tyron Woodley on the same card as Conor McGregor as a co-main event. So that's interesting. That's a good fight. It makes a lot of sense, too. Winner of that fight probably gets a title shot at 170 against the winner of Colby and Usman, although I think Nate Diaz and Masvidal, depending on how that fight goes, which should be great, probably gets that next title shot. It's hard to say at this point, though. All right, guys. I think that's it for today's show. I really appreciate tuning in, as always. Again, you guys can follow me on Twitter at MMAdamMartin. Always there talking about MMA. So don't hesitate to follow me and give me a shout on Twitter. This podcast is available at MMAOddsbreaker.com, youtube.com/MMAOddsbreaker, Spotify, SoundCloud, and now it's available on iTunes. So please go subscribe to the podcast, guys. I'd really appreciate that. And once again, guys, thanks for tuning in to today's podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with a normal show at 10 a.m. Eastern, breaking down the latest news in May, and then a second show at 11 a.m. with my buddy Cole Sheldon, breaking down UFC 244. Thanks a lot, guys, for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow. Have a good one, guys. Bye.